Hakurios meth humon. Diathomen. I suppose I should have the page open there. Blessed Lord, who caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning, grant us so to hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that we may embrace and ever hold fast the blessed hope of everlasting life, which you have given us in our Savior Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. I have not heard from Jasmine or Linda, but other than that, this is it tonight, folks. Tom and Michelle are both ill, and Bobby has something going on at the Wild Center, and Linda and Jerry have a meeting in Fond du Lac. So we are it, which means we'll play a little catch-up on some things and play with translations. Now, you should have received an email of this wonderful little flow chart that Amelia put together, but I have also printed it if you want a printed copy. And everybody's got it. Okay. And then I've also got to pass out here the translation we'll be working on for a while, which is the second 2/3 of chapter 20 in John. Oh, well, that's happened. Yeah, no, it's when you get a handout from Ephesians that you know that you're really relying on the curve. But, okay, so we have been off for 2 weeks, and so we're probably a little bit rusty getting back in the saddle here, but let's look at where we are. We have done what so far? Well, we've gone through 13 lessons in the book, 13 units in the book, and we've translated an entire book of the Bible when we translated the first letter of John. And in lesson 13, Jasmine, if you can pick these up on your way to your seat. Thank you. One more. Thanks. So as I say, we've translated an entire book of the Bible, 1 John, which incidentally is in our lessons for this Sunday in worship. We'll be getting, I think we had some last week too, but we'll be getting more from 1 John for about 2 more weeks, and so you can perhaps bring your translations with you to church and see what happens when the lector is up there reading. Or if you would really, really like to, you can go up and read yours as the lector, and we'll get the bishop's permission for that as an authorized translation. What we've looked at so far is to go through lesson 13, primary, middle, and passive endings for primary tenses. And then we were supposed to, over the last 2 weeks, also look at lesson 14, but not worry about any of the homework there. So let's look at where we are in 13, and we'll go through the homework in 13, and we'll start looking at 14, and then we'll play with our translation for a little bit. And by next week, hopefully those who are ill can be back with us, and those who are traveling can be back with us as well. So, primary, middle, passive endings. Maisai, tai, metha, este, ente, right? Now, if you're like me and you have a speech impediment, when you get to este and ente, you can start having a little difficulty, but the rest are pretty direct. We've already learned 6 tenses. However, once we start putting voices into the equation, I think it was Elizabeth who counted up 15 different variations of things we could have here or something like that. Yeah. You did? Okay. All right. You counted them all. So what this is going to obviously require is that as we're learning endings, we're just working in text, so that we start getting a little bit more familiar with just recognizing things on the printed page. But for primary and middle passive endings, we are using the present, the future, and the perfect tenses, right? So here's where we have mai, sai, tai, metha, esthe, ente. Let's review what we mean by voice. It's pretty obvious if I say active voice, I hold the book, right? But describe that to me grammatically. When we say active voice, what do we say in terms of subject and object of a verb? What does active voice mean there grammatically? The subject's doing the action, yes. I baptized, active voice. I am baptized by someone else, that would be passive voice. The relationship between the action and the subject, the relation between the action and the object will tell us whether we're dealing with the active voice or the passive voice. Now, passive voice is pretty straightforward, right? Somebody's doing something to me if I am the subject of the verb. What's middle voice? Right, the subject is active in the action, but the action may still be happening to the subject. Can we think of examples in English? Do we have a middle voice in English? No, we don't have a middle voice in English, but how would we try to translate something like that? Without even knowing the endings now, let's just take our old paradigm verb luo, right? I loose, luo. If we were to, forget what the endings might be for a minute. If we were to say that in English in the passive voice, we'd say what? I am loosed. If we were to make that middle, what would that sound like in English? Yeah, kind of, I loose for myself. What would that look like? Yeah, what does it mean to I loose for myself, for example? How do we sit there and say that the subject of the verb is involved in the action, but the action is being done to the subject? Loose might not be the right example, but it's kind of hard to figure this out in English, is it not? So what happens when we sit there and we look at a verb and we say, is this a middle or a passive? Because it says we have middle passive endings. It really is going to depend on context. It's really going to say, what is the nature of the action here? And we're really only going to be able to figure that out by looking at the whole sentence, right? Now, we'll work through that in some examples in Greek. But if we sit there and just try to figure it out on the basis of the voice of an individual verb, we're going to run in circles because it doesn't make sense. My whole point is, since these are given to us as middle passive endings, we're going to have to figure out the nature of the action in the overall context of the sentence itself. Fair enough? Okay, so if we sit there and look at the bottom of page 60 in the text, and we say, let's look at the passive voice here for luo in English. Present, I am loosed. Future, I shall be loosed. Perfect, I have been loosed. And we don't need to worry about imperfect or pluperfect, right? We don't need to worry about aorist yet, as Elizabeth points out. Yeah. So keeping going here, let's turn to page 61. The subject in the middle voice participates in the action. This may be reflexive. I loose myself for myself, sometimes called the indirect middle, or the direct middle, which indicates that the subject acted in such a way as to have an interest in the action. I loosed for myself. I participated in the effects of loosing. Now, that can get interesting theologically, right? Leave aside loose. When we talk about developments in faith, we talk about who's the primary actor in our formation in faith. Okay, theologians. Who's the primary actor in our prayer life? Prevenient grace, right? God is. And so in that sense, our development in faith could be defined as passive. However, it requires us to do what? To participate, to surrender our will that God's will might be ours. So the middle voice is going to be a rich vein we're going to mine in theology, and has been always in the Greek. And getting that translated over into other languages in ways that make sense theologically has always been a challenge. If I sit there and think about praying to God, I have to do what? I have to recognize that there's a God. I have to recognize, or I have to have some trust in God. I have to have some faith in terms of trust. I have to have some faith in terms of mental assent, that there's this thing called prayer, and it's how I communicate with God and how he communicates with me, one of the ways. I have to sit there and will that I talk to God. I have to sit there and either ask God for something or lift up someone else in prayer, or I have to sit there and praise God and thank him. I'm going through all the different kinds of prayers here, right? Or I could engage in silent adoration, in which case I've just surrendered my will to be filled by him. So my will is part of the action, but the action of the prayer is going to be upon me. And so the middle voice is going to start going towards what works a lot theologically, that we're not just independent actors, and that when we seek to be independent actors, we're ignoring God's will and sovereignty. Tough concept in 21st century West, right? Where we'd like to think of how we're going to be better people by being faithful people. You know, how I can become a better person, which is not really what faith is about. Although if I am a faithful person, I will in fact become a better person because God will make me into a better person, right? We want to be in charge. And the middle voice in the Greek here will remind us a little bit about who is in charge. Now, how do we recognize present, middle, and passive indicatives? Let's go through the rules here on page 61. They are attached to the present stem. Fair enough, because we're dealing with present, middle, and passive indicatives, right? Now, the present stem is something we're going to know by doing what? Right, the lexical form minus the first person ending. So if I say ballo, what's the stem for ballo? Try it in Greek. Beta, alpha, lambda, lambda, upsilon. Yeah, ballo. Right? Oh, no, wait a minute. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different Forget that. So if I give you, rather than luo or balo, I say gnosko, what is going to be the stem? Gnosk, right? And so if I want to make gnosko middle passive, I'm going to drop the omega, and then I'm going to take a connecting vowel, which is going to be an omicron or an epsilon. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to add the my ending, right? The primary first person singular ending, right? My, sai, tai. Remember? Prior page? My, sai, tai, metha, este, ente. So I'm going to use what as a connecting vowel here? An omicron or an epsilon? You're guessing right. So we're going to sit there and we're going to say gnoskomai. And if gnosko is I know, what is gnoskomai? I am known. By whom? Others, right? You know, they're doing the knowing. They're doing the action. Now, if I say you are known, how would we say that? That one's going to be probably irregular because we've already got, we're going to be adding another vowel there. So that might be one that shows up in our appendix for irregular verbs, and I believe gnosko is in there. It becomes an ada with a subscript. Okay, so we're just saying we don't have a connecting vowel there, right? Gnoske gets collapsed? Okay, all right. So if we sit here and say, using luo, we have luomai. So there we see an omicron. Then we have lue, luetai, luometha, lueste, luontai. What seems to be controlling between whether we use an omicron or an epsilon? Yeah, it's sound. You know, if we trace it back to why we're doing it this way, it's about sound. If rather than saying luomai, we said luemai, it'd be okay. Luotai might work. Luometha becoming luemetha again. This is probably originally a phonetic rule, but now it's just a rule. So we're going to start trying with any of these until we learn which one it takes. What does this sound like with any particular ending? And if it sounds better than with the other ending, that'll be our default trial until we're corrected. Fair enough? Primary stem, connecting vowel, primary middle passive endings. The future, however, is different because we have two different formations that distinguish the middle from the passive. And so we have future middle indicative and future passive indicative. And what's happening in the future here, just like in going from present active indicative to future active indicative, how do we do that in present and future? We had a sigma, right? And we might have a hidden sigma in there, right? We might have a consonantal blend. Same thing's going to happen here. We're adding the sigma, which may be a hidden sigma, and adding the secondary endings. So lusomai, lusei, lusitai, lusomatha, luseste, lusontai. That one's easy. When we sit there and get to the future passive indicative, then we really challenge people with my speech impediment, because we have to say what? Face. And so if you're sitting there and going to lisp, this is a good one for you. So we have luthesomai, luthese, luthesitai, luthesametha, lutheseste. That really would get you. Lucesontai, you know. Go ahead and say in Greek, you will be loosed 5 times quickly, okay? See how that works out for a tongue twister. Lutheseste. That's just cruel. I'm sorry. They didn't make me learn Greek in speech therapy, let's put it that way. Yeah, now, again, we're just going through this stuff because this is stuff you're just going to have to drill and work on endings. Takes us to the next page. Middle and passive, perfect middle and passive indicatives. So, perfect, we're going to say I have, right? What do we do with a perfect normally? There's reduplication, right? And we see that we have that here. But there is no kappa alpha. And there's no connecting vowel. So if we just see something with reduplication of the stem, and we add a primary middle passive ending on it, bingo, we're at perfect middle passive. That one's really pretty straightforward. Lelumai, lelusai, lelutai, lelumetha, leluste, leluntai. That one's probably the easiest one to remember and memorize because there are no variations we need to worry about. And they have given us the future form here of a me, I am. Now notice that they say the future of a me. Actually, what is a me? It's I am, and so the lexical form again is first person singular. The infinitive here is what? Right, to be. But we wouldn't translate a me as to be. We'd translate it as I am. The infinitive would be I nai, okay? And we very rarely encounter these infinitive verbs in Greek. So we see the future of a me, and it follows pretty much the pattern we've established so far. What happens when we want to make this subjunctive? Well, we send in a long connecting vowel, and what would have been an omicron becomes an omega. What would have been an epsilon becomes an eta. Luomai, I should be loosed. If that's middle, I may loose myself. You should be loosed. You may loose for yourself. Note the note here. There is no reality associated with the subjunctive. The use of should or may are English attempts at translating the idea of contingency and possibility, but not temporal reality. So in English we'd say I should, I might, I may, and those are attempts to say, you know, there's some contingency here, but it's a little bit more fluid in the Greek. In the subjunctive, it's saying, this isn't necessarily reality, but it might be. Again, you can see how theologically, once we see the middle voice, and once we see subjunctives in Greek, there are going to be some layers of theology that a philosopher could take and run with. Finally, again, just plowing through this stuff, we get a group of verbs called deponent verbs. And they are not listed in your lexicon under the omega ending, but under the my ending. And our friend erkomai shows up here. We've already encountered erkomai a lot, and we think of that as just the, first person. But since this is a primary middle passive ending, how do we actually translate erkomai? I come or I arrive is the translation, right? How is that passive or middle? Who's the actor? What is the relationship between the subject and the verb? Yeah, this is really sort of connoting a little bit more a state of being. I come into the room is starting to look like a state of being combined with action. And so if we go back to Spanish and note two different verbs for being, ser and estar, one would be more focused perhaps on location, and one would be more focused on identity. If I said soy americano, I am an American, that would be a state of being or identity, let's say. If I said estoy en Sheboygan, I am in Sheboygan, that's a different connotation of state of being for a verb of to be. And we're going to see that happen a little bit with these deponent verbs, that there's an idea that there's an aspect of state of being in the action of the verb. Right. Right. And so how would we approximate that in English? I know something, if we just take the verb to know. We tend to use that very broadly when sometimes what we mean is I understand something. If we're going to be precise, we might use those words differently. So the problems that all languages have with things that refer to states of being and how the action is working and how knowledge is working is it's necessarily, for want of a better word, fuzzy, because what we're talking about is subjective and not objective. If I drop this on the table, we can tell what's going on, right? What the object of the verb is, where it is, what's happening to it. If I sit there and say, I know that when I drop this marker, it is going to accelerate downwards, and the rate of its acceleration will be 9.8 meters per second squared. How would I know what the acceleration of 1g is, right? I'm sorry? Okay, but somebody had to measure all that at some point and quantify it and say that it's a constant, and that's a different form of knowledge than saying, I know that if I let it go, it'll fall. Or I drop the marker and it falls. Whenever we're getting subjectivity in something, we start getting things that Greek sometimes will handle a little bit with a middle voice. What do we do with that in faith? Well, right now, in the life of the church, one of the big battles in most of our lives is over the relation of subjective faith and objective faith, right? If we take Scripture, let's take a pretty concrete example, the Ten Commandments. We'd say this is what it means, right? This is a truth for all time. As soon as we start intersecting with the culture around us and it becomes what works for you, what's my truth and what's your truth, we start making truth subjective. And we start getting into big arguments inside and outside the church, right? The objectivity or subjectivity of truth is basically the fault line in most of the culture wars we engage in. Now, think back to, 5, 6, 7 classes ago. And one of our homework assignments was to look up the first and most predominant meaning of the word aletheia in biblical Greek. Truth, yes, but what does it mean? It means reality. Some of this comes from the fact that the writers of the New Testament, their Bible, their Old Testament is in Greek, Septuagint, and so it's going to be playing with some of those Hebrew concepts. But if we take a famous example from John 14:16 and have Jesus say what? Ego eimi, he hodos, he aletheia, he zoe, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Oh, it's in there. Okay. No one comes to the Father except by me. If we say the word aletheia, as used by Jesus here, is really kind of meaning ultimate reality. I am the way, the ultimate reality, and the eternal life. No one comes to the Father by me. We run immediately into something that starts looking objective and not subjective. And so you will hear people in churches say, well, Jesus is our way to God. But we're not excluding that you could be saved some other way. What do you do with that sentence when somebody says there could be other ways to the Father? You'd have to at least say that is a heterodox belief, not an orthodox belief, right? Now, some of us would maintain it's not a Christian belief, but then we'd be further marginalizing ourselves. It would at best be heterodox. It would not be mainstream Christian teaching. Once we start looking at subjective and objective, you can see how this language, this particular language, has multivalent little things that we can play with. And Hebrew, of course, the way its verbs work, does a lot of that to us, which is why people who are more literalist in their approach to the Bible fully believe that the reason the Bible is written in Hebrew and Greek originally is that these are languages divinely appointed by God for the purpose of expressing how God, intersects with humanity. And anything we're dealing with in translation, we've got to struggle with. Now, it's, whether or not you're a biblical literalist, you can say, well, the fact that we did get the scriptures in Hebrew and Greek means we've got to really struggle with Hebrew and Greek to say what's going on here, which is why we're taking this course, right? And saying, what new insights are we getting into our faith, our understanding of Scripture on the basis of this study? Now, that takes us to the homework on page 65. And we've got a lexical exercise for deponent verbs. And we're supposed to get some translations here. So let's just, I'm going to go around the room here. And whether you've done the homework or not yet, you can either call out an answer or we can work on it together. So let's start with Dale with ginomai. No, ginosko. So we've made ginosko into a passive or a middle passive. I'm sorry? Am I looking at the wrong one here? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Okay, we're looking at ginomai. So what are we dealing with here? What would be, can we find it in the lexicon? Is it a deponent verb? Okay, so let's turn to the lexicon. And we see ginomai on page 38 in the 5th edition here. And it says, become. So this is truly a deponent verb, to become. I become, ginomai. Again, there's an element there of the middle passive, just in terms of how we do things, but or in terms of the relationship of the subject to the action. But we would translate this as I become. Well, the action is collapsed into the subject, right? I become for myself. I mean, we could argue that, right, and say it was middle voice.
I was just following the samples of the translation of that.
Okay, so what does the lexicon give us, though, for ginomai? Yeah, it just says become is our first. Become, be, happen, take place. Arise. Now, it also gives us the option of come into being, be born, or created. That's starting to sound rather passive. Let's go to the next one. B for Jasmine here. Erkamai. No, appear would be dokeo. Erkamai, can we find this in the lexicon? It's on page 74, 75. Come, I come. So that is the lexical form. How about Amelia? Dunamai. Yeah, I am able to. Dunamis means what in Greek? Dunamis as the noun is power. And so we refer to a dynamo as a generator, or, something that makes electricity as a dynamo. Dunamis. Luke, take a look for us, please, at poreuomai. And we're on page 150. Oh, your pages are different. So what do we have? Yeah, I mean to journey, to travel, to proceed. Elizabeth, E here is a tongue twister that I'm going to have to sound out very slowly. exerkeste. Exer.
I think it is.
Well, it's got a different ending there, right? So we're going to have to find the lexical form first, right?
Right. I did have it. I didn't write it down.
Okay.
You will come out.
Exerkomai. So, and what would that mean, exerkomai? I will come out. So if this is the este ending, what is it? What person is it?
You. You will come out.
You singular or you plural? Right, so please say y'all. Y'all will come out. Now, if we made that into an imperative voice, we'd have to change it. But then we'd say, y'all come out, right? Y'all come back now. We could figure that one out in Greek, right? Okay, we're back to Dale now, and we have iserkometha. Iserkometha. Let's just play with it. We know we've got erkomai in there. And we've got the metha ending, which is what person? First person plural. So if we didn't have that ice on the front, we would say what? We come. But ice, we've added a preposition. We've mushed some stuff together. So what does ice mean on its own? Into. We come into. Iserkometha. Iserkometha. He ecclesia. We come into the church, the gathering.
Now, is that's not future passive?
Where are you getting a future out of that?
I was definitely thinking that. But it's got an omega right to the meta.
No, it's got an omicron. It's got a regular coupling vowel, not a long coupling vowel. If we did make that into an omega, how would we translate it? We might come into. We might come into the building. Yeah.
What is the translation again?
I would say, we come into. We come into. We come into. Which brings us back then to, are we back to Dale or Jasmine? Which way are we going here? Jasmine. Let's try die kontai. What's the ending on that? Entai. Yeah, they. So they're going to do something. They're going to de-erkontai. So where are we with that in the lexicon for de-erkomai? Just thinking up front, what does de or dia mean in Greek? Through or concerning. So if we say, I come as erkomai, and then we might say de-erkomai would be, I come through, maybe? They pass through, right? They pass through. Amelia, let's look at ginontai. They become, or they are born, or they come into being. Luke, give us dunontai. Bless you. Yeah, they are able to. And that brings us back to Elizabeth with pore uometha. They proceed. We proceed. We proceed. Now, let's look at the sentences. Hoi anthropoi baptisontai hupoton matheton tu curio. Hoi anthropoi, the men, the people, the humans. Baptisontai. They are, but this is a middle passive voice, right? They are baptized. The people are baptized. Hupoton matheton tu curio. Hupo is what in Greek? By means of, because of the case here. It could be under in a nominative case, right? So, by means of the disciples of the Lord. And we get our next sentence. Ho prophetes tu theu, the prophet of God, ek poreuetai, kai eis erketai ten ecclesian. Now, we already did, proceed was poreumai, right? I proceed. My sai tai, he, she, it. So, the prophet of God proceeds, but it's ek. So that would be out of, comes out of, and eis erketai, and into the church or the assembly. The prophet of God comes out and goes into the church. The church, ten ecclesian. Yeah, it's coming in and out the door. Right? You follow me here? It's making sense? What? Well, these are made-up sentences. Well, he's OCD, okay? He's got severe OCD, and he goes in and out the door, you know? And it's okay, let's play with some actual biblical Greek here and turn to John 11:21. You with me? What? Well, let's do it together then. Ipen un he Martha. What's Ipen? Said. Aorist of Lego, right? Third person singular, aorist, active of Lego. Ipen un he Martha. Un is a post-positive. How are we going to translate it here? Could be therefore or then. Hey Martha. Martha, right? Except we want to greet her and say, hey Martha. No. Said therefore, said then Martha, pros ton Iesun. Pros means to. Ton Iesun. Yeah, we've got to the Jesus because this is accusative. So we're just going to drop the article in English and make it said Martha to Jesus, Kyrie. Now, that's capitalized. Why? She's starting to talk. It's a quotation. Kyrie, Lord. I eis hode. I. If. I eis. Is, yes. This is you, past tense. If you had been here, hode is what? Aorist of a me. If you had been here, uk, not, on. Yeah, it's kind of one of these just smushy conjunctions. So not anyhow. Yeah, we can drop it in English, but not anyhow. On. Apethanen ho adelphos mu. Not anyhow would have died the brother of me. So how do we get apethanen? How do we make that the perfect from which verb? Well, let's try to parse it here then. We see an augment, right? And let's work backwards to the root then. What's the ending on it? No, this is anen, not amen. And that is a movable nu. So it's actually ane. It's third person singular. And so we work back to petho. Can we find something in the lexicon that starts looking like that? Let's find it. You're looking at pythos. That's a noun, first of all, persuasive, or an adjective. We may be dealing with something that's not going to be easily found here. I'm trying to remember how I found it. But we could park that and go get a analytical lexicon and see where we work back on that. But not would have died the brother of me. Let's find that verb. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, because I just did it without going back and looking it up. So I just got to go look it back up. Okay, so we're at our break point. We're going to take that break. I'm going to get an analytical lexicon and figure out where we found that verb before. Oh, okay. Yes, third person singular. Second aorist. So we've got a stem change here. It's of aponisco. Aponisco. So if we look up aponisco, this is a stem change. This was a second aorist. We've looked this up before, but let's go look it up again. Aponisco.
I thought we translated when we did that word when we were doing the Martha and Mary.
We might have. Aponisco. I'm not finding it in here either. Oh, I'm sorry. It's apothnisco. Sorry. Let me find it. Yes, here it is. Apothnisco. To die, to face death, to be at death's door, to be mortal. Apothnisco. Now, what does that have to do with an apothecary? To face death? We should parse apothecary and see what we get on that one in English. Are we regrouping, or have we taken a break, or what? Anybody take a break? Do we need a break? Anybody else who want to keep plowing on? Okay, we're going to take a couple more minutes then. sentence or two. Do we have one more here? And then we're going to look at our gospel translation and play in the Bible a little bit more. And I will admit to you, when I did the translation of John 20 here, that you probably encountered a number of things that gave you fits. So that's okay, you know. Just you circle the things that we can't do, and we, play with the ones we can. Now, we're in John again. Oh, we just mentioned some of those words because we've got John 14, 5 and 6. Lege auto Thomas. He says, dative, to him, Thomas. Lege auto Thomas. Says to him, Thomas. Kyrie, uk oidamen. We don't know. Not we know. That's from oida. Kyrie, Lord. Not we know. Pu, where? Hupages. Yeah, you are going. Where you are going. O-S-A, hupago. Pu hupages. Pos dunametha. Tein hodon edenai. Okay, so how? Hos, how? How are we able? How can we? Dunametha. Pos. How can we? How are we able? Tein hodon. How can the way I deny? Yes, this is the infinitive. How can the way to know? Question mark. How can the way to know? Lege auto ho Jesus, says to him, Jesus, ego eimi. Now, what does eimi mean? I am. What does ego mean? Right. And so why would this be ego eimi rather than eimi? It is for emphasis, but it is also something else. I am. What's God's name? I am. Exodus 3:14. This is the holy name of the Lord, not to be pronounced. So in Hebrew, Yod He Wol He, which you will see transliterated into English. I'm writing it, but I'm not saying it. Which you will see translated into English as God's proper name, which we generally transliterate as I am, or I am who I am, or I was, I am, I will be. It's timeless. Or in our Bibles, we would sit there and see that transliterated in most translations as all capitals, Lord. Whereas Kyrie Hebrew, we'd make Adonai. And if we put the two of them together in Hebrew, then it becomes Lord God, or Lord God Almighty. But Jesus could have just as easily said to Thomas, Eimi, he hodos, but he says, ego eimi, I am. And then he goes on, and we miss that in English because the I am just, we're used to making it work that way rather than one word, right? So we...
Give me a quick answer on this, and it's too long to say. Why does Kyrios in Greek become Kyrie in Latin? Like Russian Ray Giles and something?
No. It is an artifact of church history in this sense. In the first almost 3 centuries of the church in Rome, church is in Greek. Yeah, and doesn't really become Latin until early 4th century. And when it becomes Latin, it doesn't become common Latin. It's always a separate sort of Latin, what we'd call a sacral language. And so churches that use just the King James Bible now are saying that the language should be separate from spoken English, right? So Kyrie, kurios is the nominative. Kyrie is how it's used in liturgy because it's a form of address. It's a vocative. And so kurios would be, Lord. But if you were the Lord over here, or if I was using it as a title like Sir, I wouldn't address you as kurios. I would address you as Kyrie. It would be the vocative case. And it becomes we encounter it in the Latin liturgy, always in the vocative case. And we still say that in our English prayer book, Kyrie eleison. Christe eleison. We don't say Christos eleison. We say Christe eleison.
Okay, so why did church keep happening in Greek for 300 years and not go to Latin?
Because that was the language of the Bible.
So they just kept it up?
Yeah.
Did these people speak Greek?
No, that's we think that we in only the last couple centuries decided that we needed to have the language in the vernacular, or we needed to have worship and the Bible in the vernacular. From the get-go in the church, the Bible the Bible started out as the vernacular Koine Greek, how we communicate with everybody. But how it quickly developed in the Western church was the language of the church is separate from the language around us. It's a separate sacral language. There's a huge debate going on in Roman Catholicism right now because they've changed the liturgy. They've changed the language. And so people are saying, well, this isn't actually the way we speak. And there are elements in the Roman Catholic Church saying that's the point, that the pendulum swung too far after Vatican II towards the vernacular, and that it's supposed to be somewhat distinguished from the vernacular. Now, Church Slavonic versus Russian. It's not spoken Russian. And the Greek in the Bible and in Greek Orthodox worship is not spoken Greek in Greece. So if we could play with that. I mean, the funny thing from an Episcopalian standpoint, looking at the revisions in the use in the Roman Catholic Church in the last couple of years, has been they went from the post-Vatican to the Lord be with you and also with you, lift up your hearts, to the Lord be with you and with your spirit, which is a much more accurate translation of kai meta tu pneumatos su. But everybody thinks this is weird and archaic and an innovation, when it's actually just going back to what it originally said. But I know younger Catholics who have always grown up in a post-Vatican II environment, and they go into a church, I'm thinking of one particular church, a friend of ours, where she went to church and the priest faced the altar. And she thought this was a weird thing that she was never going back. That's the way it was always done until 1970. But she was born after then. And so some of these fights just go in circles through church history. And the Roman Church right now is in the midst of a fight over sacral language. But, you get Anglicans who are all about Rite One, or the 1928 prayer book, or the 1662 prayer book. You get churches that are all about it's got to be in the King James language and every time we encounter Psalm 23 in worship, and we have, the modern Coverdale or something like that, everybody's like, that doesn't sound right. It's not the 23rd Psalm, I guarantee you, if you're at a deathbed, you better pull out the King James Bible. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down. Don't come out with a new translation when somebody's dying. But nobody knows it. That's the one psalm most people will know if they know a psalm. Okay, so we've gotten so far in verse 6 here. Lege autoho Jesus, ego eimi he hodos, the way, kai he aletheia, and the truth, kai he zoe, and the life. Udes erketai, no one comes, proston patera, to the Father, I me diemu, if not through or by me. Pretty emphatic. Not allowing for a lot of subjectivity there, not allowing for, well, there's a different way here, right? Now, there's a theological term for this. It's called the scandal of particularity. And you being Greek scholars will tell me in what way is the scandal of particularity a scandal? How is it scandalous? Look up the word skandalon in your lexicon. Let's see if it's in our lexicon here.
Something that causes sin is occasion for sin. Something that causes stumbling or trouble or
An obstacle, yeah. Really, the original meaning is a stumbling block, what you trip over. So a stumbling block. So if the scandal of particularity, what that means is, this is where a lot of people stumble and say, particularly in a pluralistic society where we're very relativistic about things, no, that can't be right. There can't be one way. It has to be more about where the person's heart is, and it has to be about what his intention is, and it has to be about whether she's trying, and we make it all about the intent of the individual, and that causes a lot of people to say, no, that's just not it. So it is the scandal of particularity, because Jesus is being very particular, being very clear, and some people just stop right there. Now, that takes us to John chapter 20 at verse 11. We've done verses 1 through 10. I thought I did 11 through 31. Did we already do? Oh, okay. Well, let's work through what we've got here. We did 1 through 10 last time we met. So I've got 11 through 31. So if you've done 19, fine, but we've got, we'll start at 11 here and look at it together, okay? See what we can figure out. In the immortal words of National Lampoon's Animal House, somewhat cleaned up. You messed up. You trusted us, okay?
Well, 19 to 31 in order.
Okay, well, I assure you 11 through 31 took longer. Well, guess what? When we get our whole class together next week, we'll start at 19, okay? So, Maria de Aistike. Well, let's get the easy ones. How about Maria de Mary de, postpositive. No, de, postpositive. However. Mary, however. Aistike. What's the ending? Third person. Okay. Is there an augment on the front here? If we drop the epsilon and made it istike, what do we get? Can we find anything in the lexicon that might help us? Actually, since we've got a breathing mark there, it would be histike. So this is heistike. But if we say, is this an augment, and drop it? Well, first of all, can we find anything with iced tea as a start here? If not, let's try histi. And what is that? Which word are you looking at? Histemi. That's the right word. Histemi. So this is heistemi, heistike. This is a pluperfect of to stand.
But it does have an augment. That's tricky. Most of them.
Right. This is to stand as a pluperfect, so it's stood. Yeah, in English we just make it stood. Mary, however, stood. Prostonemeion. We've done this word before. It's tomb. To or at or to or before the tomb. At the tomb. Kliusa. Can we find an underlying verb? Have we started participles yet? No. Okay, all right. All right. Then I'll just tell you. It's a participle. It's a present active participle of klio. Klio means I weep. I cry. So, present active participle would be weeping. Mary, however, stood at the tomb weeping. Exo, hos, exo. Should be able to look it up. Outside, right, outside. Hos. That's from enai, and it means as. Un. Therefore. Now we got some punctuation issues here, right? Mary, however, stood at the tomb weeping outside. Stood outside the tomb weeping. It's the way we translate it in English, right? And then we'd start a new phrase or sentence here. As therefore, ekleien. This is an imperfect. She wept. As therefore she wept. Parekupsen. Well, we've actually done this word before because when we talked about the beloved disciple looking into the tomb, what did he do? He stooped down and looked. And the underlying verb here is parakupto. This is an aorist indicative active of parakupto. She stooped down and looked. She stooped and looked. Stooped down and looked. Aisto meneon, into the tomb. So far we have Mary, however, stood at the tomb weeping outside. And we'd smooth that out and say, Mary, however, stood outside the tomb weeping, if we were going to render that into better English. We'd probably ignore the therefore and just say, as she wept, she stood down and stooped down and looked into the tomb. Verse 12. Kai. Thore. Theore. Now we played with this in our 4 words for to see, remember? When we were talking about the... and so we had theore here. So, and she sees. Theore. From theoreo. Duo angelus. 2 angels. En leukois. And we've got a dative adjective, en leukois. In white, like a leukocyte, a white blood cell, leukos. En leukois. Kathezomenus. Kathezomenos. Can we find anything katheza? Is. Okay, that doesn't. Yeah, kathezomai. To sit. So kathezomenus, you haven't learned participles yet? Sitting. 2 angels in white sitting.
Oh, and this is another definite verb.
Yeah, this is a deponent verb, not a definite verb, a deponent verb. So 2 angels in white sitting. Hena pros te kaphele. Kephale, I should say. My pronunciation's terrible. Hena, 1. Pros, at. Te, kephale. Head, yeah. Think of, here's another drug term for you. We were just talking about leukocytes in blood cells, and we'd say cephalexin as a particular type of hydrocephalus. Cephalexin is a particular type of drug that has a particular shape on the head of the mole, things like that. 1 at the head, kai hena, 1 pros tois posin. And 1 at the, plural, feet. Pous is the singular. Posin, feet. It's also sometimes podos. Hopu ekaito. What's hopu? Where? Ekaito. You remember that one from before, okay. It is the imperfect indicative middle passive of keimai. Kappa, epsilon, iota, mu, alpha, iota, keimai, had lain. Where had lain to soma? Body, right, the body. Tu Yesu, the body of Jesus. Kai legusin aute o es a amen eti usi, with a movable nu because of the aute, the alpha following it. So, and say, they say, to her. But we're not going to really just make it and they say to her, because it says kai legusin aute ekainoi, and literally word by word that's and say to her they. So that's an extra word in there. It could have just been kai legusin aute, but they've made it they. Gunai, woman, singular, gunai. T, klies. No accent. Oh, there is an accent, sorry. No accent.
What was that? The connectors.
Right. With an accent, it becomes Y.
Oh.
And if we said Clio was weep, what is Clies? O ace you. Yeah. Why weep you, or why you weep? And we should have a question mark there, but there isn't one, right? Is there one in our Bible? I'm looking at, Well, let's have our Bibles open to where we're looking here. So we're at John 20, verse 13. Yes, they have a question mark there. Now, the printed version I've given you, in order to just copy it like a chapter at a time and not cut and paste verse by verse, I've copied from what's called the Textus Receptus, which is from the 16th century. And so punctuation is more of an issue. There should be a question mark there, but there isn't one in your printed version. There is one in the Bible here. Woman, why weep you? Why do you weep is why we would, the way we would do it in English, right? Lege autois. She says to them, hoti. Hoti is a postpositive here in a statement. So we're not going to say that. We're going to say what? Because. She says to them, because Aaron ton kurion. Aaron. No, look at the document in front of you. It's an Ada. It's a capital Ada. What's the ending? There's an augment going on here. The underlying verb is iro, alpha, iota, rho, omega. And it's been augmented into an eta. It's been lengthened. So we're saying it's an aorist. Aorist, indicative, active, third person, plural. They have taken away. Iro is I take away. You could figure that one out if you played with it for a while. If you shortened that vowel and said that alpha, iota, rho, omega. Yes, because it's been lengthened to an eta, augmented to an eta. You find that in the lexicon? Okay, so Aaron, they have taken away ton kurion, the Lord. Mu, they have taken away the Lord of me. They have taken away my Lord. Yeah. Kai uk oida, not I know. Pu, right? Not I know where. Ethikon, auton. Ethikon, auton. Now, we found this verb before. We've got an augment. The verb is tithemi. And so we have an aorist, indicative, active of tithemi here, third person, plural, and not I know where. They have laid him. Yeah, the stem or the lexical form is tau, iota, theta, eta, mu, iota, tithemi. It's not an omega class verb, no. Tithemi auton, laid him. Kai tauta aipusa, and these things, here we have an aorist participle of lego, these things having said, aipusa, estrophe, aista opiso. Now, before we do anything else, we've just translated something as being having said. When we see the next word there, estrophe, if it's a verb, what are we going to guess its tense is going to be? Right, it's going to be some kind of aorist, some kind of past. So if we assume it's an aorist, how are we going to look it up? Starting at what letter? Sigma, right. And so do we find something that works here? Strepho, which means turn, right? And so estrophe, she turned. Aista opiso. She turned back around. We drop the article there. Around is just a relative pronoun. Kai theorai ton Yesun. She turned back around and she sees Jesus. Estauta. That's a perfect participle of histemi. Standing. We'd have to put in a parenthetical there. Standing there. Kai uk ide hoti ho Jesus estin.
Didn't recognize it?
Pluperfect of oida, and not had known that Jesus it is. Lege aute ho Jesus. Says to her Jesus, Gunai, woman, ti klaies. Why do you weep? Yeah. Why do you have to look for the accent there. Why do you weep? Tina zetes. Think of our relative pronouns here. Tina. Whom? Zetes. That looks like present active indicative OSA to me, so why don't we look it up as zeto, zeteo? Do we find zeteo? What? Seek. Whom do you seek? Ekainai, ekaine. A singular female ending here. Ekaine. She. Dokusa. Again, we haven't done participles yet, so it's a present active participle of dokeo. So she, thinking, hoti, ho, klepuros, estin. Yeah, that's a noun that we can look up. Klepuros. Hmm? Hmm.
I know it's supposed to be Gardner, but I can't find it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not pronouncing it right. It's kuperos, not kleperos. I'm sorry. There's no lambda in there. Kuperos, kiperos, kipuros.
Yeah, Gardner.
Gardener. Thinking that the gardener it is, lege auto, says to him, Kyrie. Now, are we going to translate that as Lord?
Oh, no, sir.
It's just a formal form of address. And so to render it in English, not as the title Lord, but as the formal form of address, we'll probably translate it as Sir. Kyrie, Sir, I su ebastasas auton, if you. Aorist of bastazo. Bastas, ebastasas, if you have carried off auton, Kim. I pay, moi. Okay, but what have we just figured out about I pay? You just said tell me because you're familiar with the passage.
No, because it's the aorist, the second aorist of Lego.
Okay, it's the second aorist of Lego.
Yeah.
And what is the second person of that? No, it's not. This is a voice we haven't encountered yet. This is imperative. This is aorist imperative active. We haven't learned that voice yet of Lego. So tell me, aipe moi, pu auton, where him, ethikos of Tithemi, you have laid. Where him you have laid. Kago. Now, this is an interesting word. Kago. This is its lexical form. Mm-hmm. This is how. And I. We don't have a single word for that in English. There's a single word for and I. Kago. And I. Auton. Him. Aro. Now this one's going to mess with you. Aro. Not orao. This is aro. Right, because the lexical form is iro. Alpha, iota, rho, omega. And why? What has happened to the iota here? It's been suppressed, right? It's like, well, this is actually the future active indicative of iro. So where's the sigma? Where's the sigma, right? It has. It has been collapsed. The iota has collapsed here and disappeared. And what do we call that grammatically in Greek? We learned it. Not suppression. Not privilege. There's a technical term for this. I'm blanking on it. Somebody help me out with it in the future. When the sigma collapses and disappears. You've got it. It'll be in your notes somewhere. Yeah, we'll take away. I'll take him away. I'll take him away. And him I will take away. Yeah, but I can't remember the technical terminology for how it collapses. We'll have to look it up in the chapter on futures. And on that note, we will say that we made good progress, and when the rest of the class joins us next week, they'll only have 3 verses they didn't know they had. They'll have 16, 17, and 18 before we get to what they thought we were starting at 19. Now, what are we going to do between now and then? Well, here's the reality. What we should do is start chapter 14. But since the class has been all over the place and we've got a lot of people missing for very good reasons, what we're going to say is we're not going to start chapter 14. We'll keep everybody going on 13, and we're going to keep plowing on our own through this translation. If you can't translate it, circle it. Take some guesses, right? In pencil and say. Right, it's from iro. It's from alpha, iota, rho, omega. And it's the future of iro. So it's arrow, I will take him away.
So how many more moves just the imperative?
Well, we've got the indicative, the subjunctive, the imperative, the vocative. No, that's a case. I'm sorry. Yeah. The optative we don't encounter in biblical Greek. And there's one other I'm forgetting now. There is a table in there. You can find it.
It's in chapter 14, 15. It's one that's got a whole list of all of every tense and what you need to do to form that. But it doesn't give you the index of species. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And so, for example, when we've been dealing with tithemi or histemi, we've not been dealing with omega class verbs. So by the time we get to me verbs, we're going to recognize some of the things that are happening with them, right? We will meet again next week and continue through the end of John 20 and continue review in chapter 13. If you want to start reading 14, by all means. But don't worry about the homework in it. And let's see, it's been a while, so since she's deeply studying already, we'll ask Amelia to pray for us tonight. You're going to say pass? Are you going to pass it to your left? Which way are you going to pass that? Oh, she's passing forward, Elizabeth.
Dear Lord, please give us patience, more patience to study the Greek. Help us to realize that the purpose of learning is to further understand you and your intentions in your word. Watch over us as several of us travel, Sunday and tomorrow. Be with us as we work, live, and pray. Hopefully understanding that you are present at all times and know all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You know the problem with